Into the Wild. I read it probably 10 times, and then the movie came out. So I was ready to just hate it.
Well, Lewis Pullman, welcome to One Nightstand.
Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you.
Glad to have you here. Have you always been a big reader?
I've always been a big reader. No, maybe in high school, kind of once I discovered books that felt like they were for me, then I was like, okay, I can get into this. Once I kind of let go of the homework side of reading, I then locked in. I was like, this is an imagination playground.
Oh, that's fun. And you worked at a bookstore, right? When you were you were a janitor or something?
Yeah. My best friend Kyle McNeil, who's a great musician, he found this bookstore called Equator Books, which was on Abbot Kinney, and it was owned and run by this guy Michael Diamond, who's a great writer and painter and artist. And I think my buddy Kyle, the legend goes that he stole a book. And Michael caught him and was like, listen, you can pay that off by working here. Yeah. He ended up creating this beautiful friendship with him. And then I would start to hang out there, and we were in a band. We started to play music. It would play, shows at Equator Books. And then they had to sell Equator. And then he bought this place called Diamond that he called Diamond Books, just down the street. And then I started working there with Kyle, and we had a book club called Reading for Winners, and because Reading for Winners, and Michael would just basically was giving us all these books that they weren't teaching us in school, that he was like, I think boys at this age, we're gonna love this.
What kind of
Stuff like he introduced me to Harry Crews, and this great John Yount. And I think that, and also a lot of Dennis Johnson, and just some great, and Bukowski, which at that age you're like, this is so no, I'm not supposed to be reading this.
That's so fun. Also, stealing a book, I feel like that's such a noble crime.
Totally. I think that Michael saw that. He's like, there's some twisted intent here. Or there's good intent, just twisted a little.
That's so fun. I do think it's those books that you fall in love with when you're about 17, 18. Those are the ones that stick with me the most, because they sort of unlock something in yourself that you can't forget. I think.
What are some of those for you?
I read Vera Britton's memoir, Testament of Youth, when I was younger, and it's about World War One. Well, her brother and fiance and best friends all died in World War One, and it's about her sort of depression and stuff after. And I remember there's this one scene where she talks about being convinced she's growing a beard because her mind is playing tricks on her. And I remember at the time I was definitely going through my first bad mental health stuff, and I wasn't coming out of World War One, but there was just something about seeing that on the page. I was like, oh my god, okay, this isn't I'm not going mad kind of thing. And then another one is some A.S. Byatt books. But I don't know, it is that feeling when you're like, oh, okay, I'm not insane, or this is something I've felt. Some
little hidden camaraderie chest that you open up.
Exactly.
So there's the friends that you can find in a book. So she's kind of in that. I haven't read that, but is she basically kind of entirely alone and in absolute solitude after that?
She's sort of, she's kind of in society, because she's sort of upper middle class, and it's kind of, and then during World War II she gets in between World War One and World War II she gets very involved in the feminist movement in the UK. And so I think she decides to become more politically active after that, so she doesn't kind of retreat away from the world. But it really is just the absolute dissolution of all of these young men going off and just never returning. And there's something about the way they were just literally going over the top and being shot at. I mean, it was such an insane strategy.
I know. There was a strategy called the Never Waver strategy. I think that started in Civil War. But it was where they would intentionally put in your troop, put you next to your uncle and your neighbor, so that so that you wouldn't retreat. Because if you went home, you would be shamed, and it basically made huge generations of men get wiped out.
Oh God, it's awful.
Yeah.
Depressing books as a teenager. What's not to love? But anyway, let's start with The Solace of Open Spaces by Gretel Ehrlich. Tell me what you love about this book.
Actually, I feel like these two kind of go in a pair a little bit, because I was introduced to them both, Close Range and The Solace of Open Spaces, at the same time through my friend and colleague Brian Watkins, who wrote and was the showrunner for this TV series I did called Outer Range.
Yeah.
And I was like, what are some things that I can read when I'm gearing up for this to kind of like immerse me? And I had heard of Close Range, but I had never heard of Solace of Open Spaces. And this is just, I mean, bear with me as we talk about some of these, because I think part of the beauty of like, I'm excited to reread these. Like these were like ones that I was like, well, I know these impacted me, but they're at a stage where I could probably benefit from diving back in. But what I remember being so taken by in this is like the kind of autobiographical nature of it. She, I believe, was shooting a documentary in Wyoming about sheep herders, and then decided to just like, she couldn't bear to leave. And so it's all very like firsthand experience of Wyoming. These are both kind of Wyoming based, and I've got a lot of history in Montana, and they very much feel like cousins. And her description of, I feel like sometimes like nature poetry can, for me, feel a little repetitive or dull, and that's my own problem, because obviously there's a lot of great nature poetry out there, but this to me really like made you feel like you were, the excitement, and also the quiet. She has some great, I remember like basing some of my speech patterns in that off of her description of like how some of these ranchers speak, and their economy of words.
Exactly, they collapse all these words together.
Yes, because they're saving their essentially like on a very like survivalist level, like saving their little energy in terms of like how they compress their sentences and the poetry of their words in order to kind of like say less with more, say more with less. And sorry, it's early for me. And I just remember thinking like, and also even like the way they might turn their head away from the wind or in the side of their mouth. I would love to meet her. She seems like a very interesting person.
Yeah. She also writes with such compassion about especially these men who are kind of, I mean, some of these characters, I couldn't get over it. Like when she's telling the story about one of the guys who's like, his like undergarments have been changed so infrequently, like the hairs are growing into them, and like another guy who like almost tries to, well, he doesn't almost try, he sort of tries to like harass her a bit, but she's sort of so compassionate about these people. She's like, they're living in complete isolation, they never encounter many people. I mean, it's kind of remarkable.
Yeah, it is. I think that story about that reminded me of this story that my uncle, who's a doctor out in Montana in Butte, he told me a story of like one of his friends who had, I think it was like they found this hermit who had been fallen ill to something, and they found him. I think a hunter like went up there and found him, and he was like kind of comatose, and they like went to go strip him of his clothing, and he hadn't changed his long johns for so long that those like waffle long johns, his skin had kind of started to almost like it just encompass that, and then they had to like peel some of his flesh off as they're like trying to pull it off. But it makes you think about sometimes when he must have been, he was up there by choice.
Yeah, totally.
That alienation was in some ways like that's how he knew to exist best. And I think that like the plea for company, while also like the total dismissal of society at the same time, that kind of marriage is something that I feel like she captures really well.
Are you an isolation person? Do you like being isolated? Or
I'm always like, when I've got one, I miss the other.
I completely agree.
And I yearn for it, and it's like a kind of this antsy thing of like, even just being here in New York, like I feel it pretty immediately coming here. and I like it. I like the hustle and bustle. I like watching people. I like overhearing bits and pieces of their conversations. But I do feel like there's this weird crust, this like hard shell over the earth that's like kind of hard to puncture here.
Yeah, I agree. Some of the bits that I wrote down as well, that I thought at the end of the first paragraph, she talks about how we like build against space in most of the world, and I thought that was so like beautifully kind of put, and kind of captures how I sometimes feel when I'm in cities, that you like, it's almost not in cooperation with the space at
Yes,
all.
right. Yeah. I know. And all our instinct and structures to go for hard corners.
Yeah.
I always love like a Spanish house, or like an adobe house, because of the rounded, kind of more organic shapes. It feels like you've burrowed into a boulder or something.
It's cozy. There's also so much in this book about kind of animals and the importance of animals. I think at one point she said they hold us to what is present, which I thought is interesting. Are you a big animal person?
Definitely, yeah. I remember feeling like she captured that very well. My aunt is, she has a huge cattle ranch, my aunt and uncle, and I was just there for a little while with my dad, and there was branding, on Saturday there was branding, and I was doing, in putting these, it's an interesting process, because she it's like she knows every calf, and she knows when they come through, she knows their history.
Yeah.
And some of the process can feel, like I was putting this vaccine into their nostrils, which is like kind of a blue, it looks like a liquid Jolly Rancher, and like in the kind of act itself, you have to like try and make it as brief as possible.
Yeah.
and use as much empathy as possible, and they're branding at the same time, and so that you smell the burning hide, and some of it is like it does, like I'm helping them and elongating their life and giving them their quality of life, enhancing it. But it is like the kind of like coexistence of life and death in kind of in a place like Montana or Wyoming, in the conditions like like what Gretel was experiencing, is like very well captured. I think that I am an animal person, and I like people ask like, what are you, cat or dog person? And I definitely am like, I like all animals.
All of them.
Yeah.
Do you have any pets?
I have a dog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. And does he or she travel with you, or?
I actually got him while I was shooting out a range.
Oh, fun.
And in New Mexico, from a pound in Santa Fe. He was found in the streets of Albuquerque. He had a big scar on his nose and like a chip missing from his ear, and he's a little skittish blue heeler. So I can't really I can't put him on a plane. I've drove with him a couple places. If I can drive to a location, I do bring him. But I haven't put him on a plane. I think like I've got him to a place where he exists like pretty comfortably.
Yeah.
He still has his weird things. He's scared of shiny floors.
Oh, interesting.
And he would be trying to herd everyone in this room into one corner right now.
Interesting.
But I miss him whenever I'm out with him.
Yeah.
But also, like, I understand that he's a creature of habit, and like he needs consistency, so I don't want to mix it up for him too much.
In your sort of new movie, Remarkably Bright Creatures, the sort of Marcellus the octopus is obviously like a sort of catalyst for change in the movie, right?
Yeah.
Has your dog ever, like, do you feel like he's been a catalyst for change in your life in any way?
Definitely. Sally Field and I talked about this a lot, because she had just gotten a dog in COVID, and that's when I got Bodie, my dog, because we were shooting and it was like peak COVID. We couldn't really hang out with anyone. I think for me, the immediacy, like his kind of like the reminder, like I so often will be caught in a spiral in my head and kind of almost enter this state of paralysis, and like he literally like will like I have a video of him in my car where we were driving, and he's like putting his paw on me, like in this kind of like metronome of like reminder of like the seconds that are happening, and like he needs like one of 5 things, you know, at any given point, and it's the simplicity of that, and then also like his unconditional love is just like a total reminder of like what's important.
Yeah, totally. How was that making the movie with Sally Field? Look, it's so fun. I watched it last night. I loved
Really?
it. Yeah.
Oh my God, it was so fun.
Yeah.
I'm gonna miss working with her, because it was just I looked forward to every scene that I got to do with her, because she's so playful, and you know, she has that perfect balance of taking it so like deathly seriously while also being so childlike in her exploration, and it makes for a lot of surprises. I remember, you know, because she worked so hard on it. She had read it in galleys before it had even come out, and she had been with this story for a long time, a lot longer than I had. But she still then each morning, you know, when we got there, wouldn't make that like influence her in her rigidity of like, you know, keeping to the whatever she had planned or anything. It was quite the opposite. Like, and so it took me a second, because I'm such like the only way to like quell my anxiety about a project is through preparation. And I, you know, have all those stupid, you know, little actor plans and ideas that, you know, that when you get there and you want to, she kind of would not throw it all out, but like, you know, let those live and coexist within her spontaneity, and like the change of the air in the room. And so like at first I was like terrified for the first week, just because I was like, she's mixing it up and changing the words and improvising, and then once I realized like my sole job is to basically show up prepared and then basically be her, you know, listen and react. And once I found that, it was like such a freeing experience. And like I'm gonna take that into every project I do.
Oh, I love that. I also feel like the line that she says often in this of like there's a right way and a wrong way to do things is a kind of theme in a lot of these books as well. Like especially totally. Like all of the kind of wild outdoorsmen in a lot of these books have that kind of mentality.
Yes, yeah. And then I think as we get into the Harry Crews maybe and the Sam Shepard of it, there's a little more wild, untamable aspect in there. But yeah, the right and the wrong way thing, strangely, like even however simple that is, like definitely did affect me afterwards in a weird, like kind of practical way. Like even just like keeping order within my house and room and kitchen.
Oh, interesting.
Like, and kind of seeing the buildup of laziness or of like thinking something, you know, I don't know, even just like washing your dishes immediately after you eat, and like taking the time to do those things and not just doing them to do them, but also finding the enjoyment and the meditation within those
totally
more mundane,
the like pride and discipline, I guess.
Yes,
to some
pride
extent.
And discipline. Yes, I always remember Josh Brolin saying discipline is freedom. And I was always like, I don't get that. What are you talking about? And like eventually that really sunk in to me, like that within that kind of like structure provides a sense of like security and like strength and power.
Yes.
Like you have this like skeleton, if it's routine or habits, like it gives you this sense of like, I don't know. It gives me a feeling of like I'm like a little indestructible when I'm really flowing with something like that.
I agree. I also think it's that like I always remember reading like a big interview with Barack Obama, and he talked about how he wore the same suit every day because he's like, I've got a finite amount of decisions I can make in a day, and I can't waste it on an outfit. And I think there's some of that with discipline where it's like, it's not a discussion in my mind whether I'm doing these things, so I can use all my brain power on other things rather than these things I've already decided are happening.
I've heard David Lynch did that as well.
Oh, really?
That's why he always was kind of uniformed.
Interesting. Yeah, I can see how it works, definitely.
Yeah.
Because it's like if you use a lot of your brain space on something early in the morning, like deciding, oh, am I going to do that today or tomorrow? I'll just leave it, like, whatever.
Yeah. Do you have, what habits and like routines do you have that you feel like you've been able to really stick with?
Oh, gosh, good question. I'm pretty good with my, like, night routine of, like, reading before bed. That is really, like, my no phone time, like, kind of switching off. And then in the morning, I'm, like, a big tea drinker, and tea is, like, if I'm having a cup of tea, I feel, like, grounded, I guess.
Yeah.
And then I guess being outdoors sometimes, but I don't know. What about you?
Wait, I need to know more about your reading ritual. Where do you put the phone? How do you not fall asleep? What's your routine?
Well, I phone on the floor, but I also go to bed really early. Like, I'm like an early to bed person. I'll be like 8:30, like, and then sit and read for like 90 minutes. That's my like dream
90?
evening. Yeah. Like,
oh my God, this is a great routine.
I don't know. I mean, is it? I get a lot of pleasure from it. So I think it's like when those, not assholes, I don't mean it in a bad way, but people who like running marathons, I'm always like, could never, but I think they just like running, right? And I think I like reading. I don't know.
Yeah. I think that it's working for you. You seem like very alert and articulate at this hour.
Well, I'm also a morning person, but I don't know. I'm not sure if the reading does that, but I don't know. What about you though?
I need more structure in that area. Like I was, in when I'm not at home, my structure goes out the window, and then I kind of feel destabilized and like And that's when you're doing I wouldn't even consider this press. This is such a great kind of just conversation. But like, you need that. I don't know. It's so kind of like you're bouncing around, going so many different places, kind of like repeating yourself so much and kind of getting sick of the sound of your own voice and like
same questions, same answers.
Yeah, which is what's nice about this. You get to kind of like reframe the story, and this is about remarkably bright creatures, but it's also about books, and so then you get to kind of like shift your seat in the room a little bit, look at it from a different perspective. But I do find that like I feel really stupid doing these things because I end up answering the same thing multiple times, and I only have so many ways of saying the same thing. And then I get to the bottom of my answer and I'm left like with facing my own limitations and my own intelligence. And I basically every day doing something like that end up like looking at it. And then every once in a while, like this is a great way to kind of like pry into especially when you have an experience like making movies, like you do it for 3 months or however long it is, or 20 days, or if it's an indie, and then you leave it for months, if not a year and a half. This was, over a year ago for me now. And kind of like looking back and being like, what did stick with me? You know, even that, just thinking about, there's a right and wrong way to do things. Like what stuck with me from working with Sally, what stuck with me from doing a book adaptation that's different. I've done that now 3 times. And I think, Salem's Lot, Lessons in Chemistry.
I love Lessons in Chemistry.
Yeah, I love that one too. And there is something interesting about that challenge. Yeah,
it's a lot of pressure, especially with a book like Lessons in Chemistry that people love.
Yes, people really love, and I kind of like, I felt that. I remember feeling that with Into the Wild. I read that. That was one of my favorite books, and it really shaped me. Yeah. And I read it probably 10 times, and then the movie came out. And I was like, had all these. I was ready to just hate it. And I loved it.
Oh, that's good.
I loved it, and that became one of my new favorite movies. Oh. And I thought that Sean Penn did such a good job adapting that, because it was like, there's so much within that that's so playful, and so much about capturing, I think, a book is the spirit.
Totally.
And like acknowledging what people loved about it, but then also being like, I think the only thing that I can really, my only compass is what I loved about it. So like with Remarkably Bright, like I for a while was like, okay, trying to like read up on everyone's like favorite things and all the kind of like conversations around Cameron, what makes him lovable, what makes people not, what they felt like unfulfilled by or whatever. And then I was like, I can't answer all these questions. Can't. I just have to try and answer the questions that I have about Cameron.
And I think I like that. I like when an adaptation like takes a swing.
Yeah.
And is like the director's point of view on that book. Especially because I mean, I grew up reading a lot of like British classics like the Austens and the Brontes and stuff. And I love it when they take a swing and just like go, no, I'm going to do something different. Yeah.
What's one of your like favorite or books that has been adapted where you were like, yeah.
There's a early Jane Eyre, like a BBC or an ITV, like British TV adaptation that had oh god, I can't remember her name, Ruth Wilson in it. That was, I liked that. I thought that was fun. I like when they, with the Austen, I mean, I love the Keira Knightley Pride and Prejudice. Have you seen that one?
Yes.
Do you like it?
So much.
It's so good, right? It's kind of like fun, and I don't know, I remember when that came out there was like outrage about parts of it, but I don't know, I thought it was, I liked that one.
I miss Keira Knightley.
Right.
She should be doing 5 movies a year.
I would love to see
although
that.
maybe she's just happy.
Yeah, she's probably like,
she's just being
doing
selective
what she wants to
and
do.
doing what she wants to do, and good on her.
Yeah, onwards. But no, I think that Pride and Prejudice one's fun. But I'm trying to think, there must be a weirder one I can think of, but my mind's going blank.
Yeah, it'll come.
All right, well, why don't we talk about the Annie Proulx book next, given that it's kind of similar.
Yes, absolutely.
Tell me what you love about these short stories.
I like the permission she gave herself to kind of go into this sort of, like, she flirts with magical realism in this in a way that I love.
Yeah.
I love that genre. I love it in film. I love it in books. There's some of that, you know, Shepard does that quite well. And in some of these stories too. But I think, you know, this collection is probably most famous for the Brokeback Mountain short story, but I just remember each one feeling like, yes, this is such a good compilation and they all are related, but I felt like it almost felt like they were written at different times of her life, and they feel so very much individual and they stand alone so well. I think that's a hard thing to do. I'm not a writer, but in all the creative writing classes I took in high school and college, I remember feeling like almost like if it were a record, like my songs were too similar, you know. And I think Annie has a great kind of her color wheel is very broad. Yeah, it's actually amazing how much she does in such a small space as well. Yes, because I mean, that one story at 55 Miles to the Gas Pump, which is 2 pages, the one where the bodies are in the attic. I don't know if you remember. I was just like, what? And like, how does she do that? Like, it's so vivid, it's so immersive. You're like in that world. Yes, right. Yeah, that's right. Also, I think she has one of my favorite titles in one of these. I can't remember right now. Where's her index here? Oh, People in Hell Just Want a Drink of Water. Yeah. It's just such a good name. Yeah. The Blood Bay, The Bunch Grass, Edge of the World, Pair of Spurs. Yeah, the Pair of Spurs, the magical realism in that one. Some story, I think I'd read The Half-Skinned Steer before, but I hadn't read Brokeback Mountain in full and some of the others, and I found it like hard to lock into at first because the sentences are quite unwieldy. Yeah. Are you good with that kind of structure, or do you tend to lean more like short and crisp and to the point? If my brain isn't like kind of like synthesizing well with how the words are trickling out, like I've learned to be a little more forgiving about like leaving that for someone else. But I think like, and it depends on like, poetry, I guess, I do tend to lean more, I don't know, I think Harry Crews does it really well, which is like a simplicity while also like having like it has space still for these larger esoteric ideas. And I don't know, I think that the kind of like I don't like to read something that feels like a puzzle. No, like I don't like a poem that feels like you have to figure it out. I completely agree.
Can't stand it.
No.
As I could never, when I studied English at university, and whenever it was any of that kind of like poetry, I was just like, why are they just trying to say it in the most complicated way possible?
Yeah.
I'm like, fuck off. I don't need that.
Yeah.
But no, it makes sense with Annie's writing. It's sort of like you're immersed in this world, and like once I locked into it, I felt like I was like almost gliding along.
Yeah,
But
right.
it took me a minute, definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
Did you like the Brokeback Mountain story specifically?
Yeah, specifically, I like how she works with language, like language within the story, like what people are saying, and how she kind of like her vernacular and when she decides to kind of like interpret what someone's saying versus say actually write what they're saying.
Yeah,
I think it's really smart.
totally. There's also like a lot of like placelessness in her book, in her stories. I thought of people who are like maybe have come from one place and are now in another place and they still feel tied to that place. I know you grew up between sort of LA and Montana, is that right?
Yeah.
Do you ever feel that where you're sort of like split in two a bit?
All the time.
Right.
Yeah, that's the blessing and the curse of being lucky enough to, have multiple homes in your life, and places that you feel like you could call home. And my dad is from upstate New York, and so that even then I have that, that tether, which is like an anchor and a tether, I feel like I probably, very much am composed of my experiences in both places, in all places. And also, my dad, following him around as a family, we ended up living in little periods, in different places. So we would go and follow him and be homeschooled and
Oh wow, really? Gosh.
in Vancouver or Calgary or Prague.
Wow. Did you like that, or is it hard?
At the time, maybe not. I had a brother and sister who I loved so much. So in some ways it was like I had the consistency within my family. But I did like, I think it like helped kind of curate my appreciation for like the vast nature of humankind, I think, and like not allow like a bubble to kind of form over my head in a lot of ways, and kind of like keep sort of like the peripheral macro image in my mind. But it's the same thing, when I'm in California, I can't wait to get up into Montana. And although I was just in Montana and I was like, I could have stayed there for another 2 months. I was like ready to stick around.
Do you have your own place there, or do you stay with family? Or
Yeah, we've got my folks have a place. That's across the way from my aunt and uncle.
Oh, that's so lovely. So you can go and then just like completely unwind.
Yeah.
But it is a weird place. I feel that with being like living in a different country now, like I refer to both home interchangeably. When I'm in the UK, I'm like, oh, I'm going home next week. And when I'm here, I'm like, oh, I'm going home in 2 weeks. It's a weird thing.
Right. Yeah.
But
I know. I'm like, I'm here in New York for another week and a half, and I'm like, I know I've got so much stuff to do. I'm so excited about it, and I know I'll probably like go home and be like, damn, there's so many things I didn't do, or I didn't appreciate, the kind of like, I don't know, there is a very romantic thing about New York that I definitely can get into.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to like, I do like it. I feel the excitement. I just think that when I go inside a house, like even now I can feel the kinetic energy whirling around us right now, even though you can't hear it.
Yeah.
I can feel it.
Have you ever shot a movie in New York?
No, but I've shot in Hoboken.
Okay, yeah.
New Jersey.
Would you ever want to do like a New York movie kind of moment?
I could get down with doing a play here.
Ooh, fun, yeah.
I was here when my dad was doing a couple different plays, and got homeschooled here, and so I think I spent like 6 months here, and I saw him with his routine, and like the community around that is so rich and so exciting. I could get down with that.
How old were you when you did the 6 months in New York?
I think however old was, I think he was doing The Goat. I forget how old I was. I wasn't allowed to see it, but I obviously, I think I must have been around 10 or something.
Okay, yeah.
Gosh,
I can't imagine what that's like to be popping up in different cities when you're that age, but I suppose...
Were you pretty much kind of
just like in the suburbs of Birmingham, just...
Yeah,
the same. But I don't know, I guess We only know what we know, right?
How old were you when you came here?
31. Like
Okay.
6 years ago. So,
Yeah. How often are you missing Birmingham?
I go back like 4 times a year, probably,
Okay.
because I'm close to my family. I've got sisters with kids that I'd love to go and see, but I also love leaving as well. Like, it's a weird thing, isn't it? You sort of, I find cities quite anonymous in a way that I like, in the way I actually find sometimes, like, complete isolation of open space is almost a bit oppressive. Of like, the quiet can make me feel anxious.
Really? Oh, yeah.
I don't know, but I know that's odd. But
no, I think that's why New York is filled with so many people.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think you're alone in that.
We're all seeking to be overwhelmed. Well, maybe we could talk about Motel Chronicles.
Yeah.
Sam Shepard, which is, I loved reading this.
Oh, wow, you're a fast reader.
I try.
There's no way you read all
I
these.
didn't get through all of these. I mean, this is like 3 novels
It's
and a
dense.
memoir.
I know, yeah.
But I did read all of these.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really impressive.
Well, I
I'm
listen
so
as well.
jealous.
I do listen.
Okay, yeah.
I
that's
listen
still
to
reading.
a lot of this, yeah.
Sally and I discussed this, and we
counts.
both believe that it counts.
It definitely counts.
Yeah.
Tell me what you love about this book.
You know, it's in some ways a little inside baseball. I think that as an actor, like him and his experience kind of being this kind of I don't know what you call it. I'm thinking of a word that is, I don't think, kosher to say anymore, but he is like a, oh gosh, he's like he's a traveler.
Yeah.
In a way that I really relate to, you know, this kind of like going from hotel to hotel or motel to motel, and like having, you know, these kind of in between sort of purgatory-esque towns be your temporary home, and what that feels like, and kind of going from these, because he basically essentially, these are a lot of, you know, some of them are not related, but some of them are like these accounts of his experiences, you know, working on movies and going from movie sets to movie set, and kind of putting on the different clothes and kind of losing yourself a little bit in the swamp of identity, and I just think that in some ways he captures the loneliness of that really well, and in some ways he can kind of like romanticize it in a way that I feel like helped me make it feel like, okay, well, this is an old trade, and I'm not, you know, this is not like a unique experience, and maybe there is something like kind of noble about this kind of like rootless existence in some ways. Also, it was inspiring to be like, well, you can tell that these are stories. Some of the stories are like bred of from his experience there, and they don't feel like you can tell that I don't think he probably wrote these thinking, I'm gonna put these all in a book and call it the Motel Chronicles.
No, definitely not. No, I mean, he gives such like dignity to the things he sees.
Yeah.
I think, like, you know, I loved that one page where I think he gets back from a bar or something, and he runs into the woman who's been acting as the stand-in for the like lead actress, and she's like sad and drunk because the movie's leaving town and she's going back to being.
Yeah, right.
It's like, oh gosh, it's so, I don't know, it's really moving.
Yeah, he kind of like really captured the kind of the traveling circus element of the film business. Oof. Really well. I forgot about that part. That's such a good piece.
It was so good, and I loved the like sort of poem, or if that's the right word for it, about LA, where I think it's on page 63. I wrote it down because I just thought it was, he sort of captures this, what feels like the sort of vacuousness of like Hollywood, I think, which probably feels most vacuous when you come back from being on a set around like normal.
Yeah, it's interesting, you know, like this reminds me of this feeling of like this is maybe, he was maybe in a little bit of a pessimistic moment in this part, which I can relate to at times. The loneliness is covered with grins, and the loneliness is smothered in a circle of quote friends. That's bleak. I think what I relate to there is like, you definitely feel like, you know, when you go and shoot these things, it is this, it's like you create this little small village and you make, these incredible, it's all very intense. And you experience every day, such an isolated experience that only you guys share.
Yeah, it's intimate.
It's intimate, and you all kind of leave your lives behind, and you're trying to kind of keep your lives back home afloat, and your friendships and whatnot, and then you go home, and everyone has kind of been experiencing their lives. They've not just been on pause, and you're trying to catch up, and then you feel a little lonely because you've missed so much, and then you try and go back and connect with your friends who were just on the shoot and connect with them and feel that camaraderie again. But they're all off in their own hometowns, busy doing their, revitalizing of their lives. And the kind of continual like tilling of the land doesn't ever stay settled for too long. And I think, that I connect to that. He must have been in a rut in that beat.
Yeah, definitely. I know that your father worked with, he would starred in some of his plays, right?
I know that he...
Or was they in a movie together as well?
Yeah. What did they do together?
Bright Angel, I think.
My gosh, that's right. Yes. And he's done, he did Buried Child and with Kathy Bates, and I'm sure he did a bunch more, definitely when he was younger.
Yeah, totally. I think it was like earlier. Did you ever meet Sam Shepard at all? Or?
No, I didn't.
Oh, would you have liked to, or is it the kind of thing where you would have found it like, don't meet your icons kind of vibe?
I would have loved to.
Yeah,
I think that my old agent Hildy Gottlieb represented him and heard a lot of great stories about him through her. And I think, it depends. At a certain, like I met, meeting Jeff Bridges was a huge, like he was an icon and is an icon and a huge hero for me. And I think, he was so generous with his like friendship and time and wisdom to me, and really was like he exceeded all my expectations. But I think even if he was, a bitter curmudgeon or something, I would have been like, well, you earned it, Jeff.
Yeah, literally, truly.
I don't think you can really take away from all that I've learned from reading or from watching Sam Shepard. But I would have loved to have met him. Yeah, and obviously a huge fan of his.
Are you much of a, I feel like these are like scraps of journals almost, like all of these different entries. Are you a journaler at all?
I am not maybe in the most... No, I would love to be kind of a rigorous journaler. I'm not. I feel I can do like kind of the brain drain, like the untethered, not necessarily like me-centered journaling, which is maybe not as cathartic. But I don't know. I always feel like a self-conscious writing about myself. I'm like, maybe, gosh, who was I just talking to about this? Who said that they burn their journals?
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oof. Darn it. Somebody recently was saying that they write their, oh gosh, it'll come to me and then I can credit them for this brilliant tool, but they write, it was a friend of a friend who they write their journals and then they hide them away, lock and key, and then once the book is filled, they burn it. And that's like something that they know that they will do, and they might, have a separate journal for things if they want to have their own Motel Chronicles or something.
I like that.
I like that too. Yeah. I think that I want to adapt that because it feels like a pretty easy way to get rid of all of that kind of voice in your head. Like, is this, am I going to be reading this when I'm, on my deathbed? Is my kids going to be reading this? Or I
never want to read pages that I've journaled. I'm like, it's like out and gone. Never want to think about it again.
Yeah, right. I know.
I mean, I feel like this book as well, and kind of the Annie stories, they have like quite interesting portrayals of like the challenges of masculinity in a way, and the sort of like different pressures and liberties, and like, and I guess the different ways that it arrives depending on what culture you're living in. Do you ever feel that now in like your work and in your life, like the pressures around like how we think about masculinity today?
Big question.
I know.
No, that's a great question. I guess, I was a social work major, and this came up a lot in conversations because I was the only male in my class.
Oh, wow, interesting.
Which says something alone.
Yeah.
You know, that social work, which is such a the act of like this endless act of giving and this kind of like, yes, totally like not asking for anything back kind of profession. And I did find that there were times where I was, you know, where it was like none of my classmates or teachers were ever expecting me to be the voice of all the men in the world, but there were times where I was like having to kind of try and speak to that. But I don't think too much. Well, obviously I do. I do a lot of projects that are like, you know, I think that the most interesting projects are the ones from voices that are less heard or less, you know, stages that are not as acquired by those voices as often. And so I think I have done a lot of roles that by that nature are, you know, unfortunately for our narrative for some reason in the zeitgeist, like, well, now we're in a great time where female voices are being heard a lot more, but there's still a massive amount of room to increase that. And so like, I think, I don't know. I think that I probably come from a great place of privilege where I was raised a lot by my sister and mom, you know, and so I have a lot of them in me. I don't feel like I have to like proclaim my masculinity in a way. And maybe that's, that's a result of me being like lucky enough to not have to, or lucky enough to have them to kind of like encourage me to not feel like the need to fill that space with whatever my generation might consider masculine. I guess I was raised more like in values that are kind of genderless, and values of what make a person strong or confident or true to themselves, what speaking your mind looks like, and what expressing yourself looks like, and what not expressing yourself looks like. I guess we should schedule another hour to talk about that.
Talk about masculinity. Well, your final book has some very interesting ideas about masculinity as well, the classic Cruise collection, because I mean, the story in this car was so crazy.
Oh my God, yes. Remind me about this.
Was the one where the man eats the car?
Oh yeah, right.
I was like, what the fuck?
Yes. Well, that reminds me of, there's a true story about a guy who ate an entire airplane.
What? I've never heard that before.
Nut by nut, bolt by bolt. And I wonder if he was inspired by that at all.
Yeah. But I mean, it's crazy. But the memoir at the start as well, about his childhood is so beautiful.
Yes, that's one of my favorites, because I think that him as a person is such an interesting guy. He, you know, grew up in Bacon, Georgia. Yeah. And, you know, his dad died very young, and then his mom married his brother. Yeah. And he didn't know that he was his dad for quite a long time. And yeah, he had these two very traumatic experiences where he had, gosh, what was it? Some sort of like rigor mortis or something?
Yeah.
His legs were...
polio, was it? Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And then the vat of something where his skin came off.
Yes, he fell into a vat of boiling water. Yeah. I think that they were roasting a pig or something, which I think they did. They dig a hole, and they, like, you know, they built a fire down there, and it was a vat of boiling water that he fell into, and all except for his head. Yeah. And so he was bedridden a lot of his childhood. And so I think that he definitely, I think that, you know, Car Story, a lot of his themes are definitely considered kind of more muscular and like definitely like he touches on, Feast of Snakes is a great novel of his that he does this really well. And also, oh gosh, what was the one about the bodybuilder? Body. It's just called Body. Yeah. I think that he subverts it really well, where he's also very intrigued by the alien and the outcast. Exactly. And I think,
it's uncanny, a lot of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like he has a beautiful celebration of that. Like the person who's maybe considered the freak or whatever it is. He has like a great humanization of that and intrigue in that kind of like the cobwebs of society.
Yeah. When I was reading up on him, a lot of the stuff I read said that his essay about fatherhood was really good. So I read that last night. It's quite short, but I thought it was so beautiful because it starts with the scene of his son dying from in a pool and like his first son, and it was just like, and then it ends in the most beautiful way where it's basically he talks about his son that survived. They're like on some kind of hiking trip together, and his son's like, I'm dropping out of college, and he like worked at a college as like an English professor, so he was really distressed by that, and his son was like, I want to be a musician, and he's like, how many people do you think leave college to be musicians? And he's like, probably as many who wanted to be writers. And his dad is like, touche, good luck kind of vibe. And I thought it was so loving because it was so sort of like, it was that like ping pong of a good relationship with a parent where like they can say something to you and you can hear it and you can hit it back, and like I thought it was really beautiful. Oh
my gosh, ooh, you're making me want to read it again.
It is, it's a good one. I thought it was going to be like a more tortured relationship of him as a father, and he talks about being a flawed father, but I thought it was just like such a beautiful way of like wrapping it up.
My friend Kyle, who I was telling you about, who I worked at Diamond Books with, he was in the grade below me, and then when I was going to college, he was like, I don't want to stay at high school another year, and so he got his GED and applied to the same college that I was going to, and then we both went together, and he was taking a creative writing class, and he reached out to Harry Crews.
Oh wow.
And was like, I want to interview you. And he I think responded in like maybe 10 words or something, and it was like, something like, you know, I don't usually do that, but here's my address or something like that, and hung up. And then that was all that he got from him, and he tried calling him back and he didn't hear back. And then my friend Kyle was like, I'm gonna just buy a ticket and go out there to Georgia. And he did, and he knocked on his door, and he spent like, I think like 4 days with him.
Oh my gosh.
And he was bedridden at the time, and had a nurse living with him. But my friend wrote such incredible like short essays about that time with him, and I always wanted him to put it out there. And it's horrible to even bring it up right now because I don't have them, and I don't even have excerpts to read from, but they were so incredible in the stories that he got from him, and how he still, like, you know, remained so true to, you know, the voice that you kind of grow to love in his books. And he is kind of like one of the characters in his books.
Oh wow, that is amazing. That's like my dream. I mean, to go and like spend that time with a writer you love, I can't even imagine.
I think he opened the door and he was like, oh fuck, you really did it, huh? You got the ticket. Okay, come on in, kid.
Is there a living writer you'd try and do that to?
Whoa, good question. Oh my god.
I don't know what my answer to that is either. It's a hard one. It feels too big.
It's big.
Yeah.
Who do you...
I don't know. I'm thinking it's too big. But yeah, maybe like a Zadie Smith, I guess. Like, or like Margaret Atwood. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's interesting. But I think it's also that thing of like with writers, they're often like who they are on the page and off the page are so different that you sort of like maybe when I don't know if it's always helpful.
Is Dennis Johnson still alive?
No. I don't know. Yeah, that'd be a good one.
Be a good one.
Yeah. One of the things that in his memoir that Harry Crews says is that he thinks everything that's been most significant in his life had all happened by the age he was 6 years old. Which I thought, is that true for you, do you think?
No.
No, me neither.
No, but I do know there's some total truth to that. You know, you hear that basically like our kind of like psychological makeup that we're sitting here with right now was pretty much all shaped between like 1 and 5. I think.
I like to tell that to my parents all the time.
Totally.
When I'm dragging them.
Yeah, it's such a terrifying fact, right?
I know.
It's like we're such delicate etch-a-sketches that could be shaken up at any point in there. yeah, those first years are really, but then it's like, okay, so then after the 5 years, what, is nothing really matters?
No, exactly. I don't think I agree with it completely, but I think like it's more that like your gut reaction to most things is probably set by the age of 6. So if you don't make the effort to intervene your like instincts, sometimes you probably are a bit set on a course by then.
Yes,
but you can,
right.
I mean, that's what therapy is, right? To sort of redirect.
Yes.
when helpful. Are you a therapy person?
I am. I am. I haven't been in therapy recently, and I definitely should be. I should go. We always should be.
Right.
I think that I shot something and then I couldn't keep up with it, and then I didn't go back. But it's a practice. It's a habit. It's a muscle. And yeah, I think that I can definitely get into a thing of like feeling like if I don't have anything to talk about, then there's nothing to talk about, and which is exactly the wrong mindset.
But it is hard though when you go and you're like, I don't have much to say this week. Yeah.
But that's when you get into the weird stuff.
I know. That's so true. You know? That's so true. But that's the kind of stuff I like to keep buried.
I know.
We don't want to get it
therapy?
out. Yeah, I do it I have a great therapist that I got, because we don't really have it in the UK in the same way. So I only really got into it when I moved to America.
What do you mean not in the same way?
No, it's just not normal there.
It's not as common.
No, we're like repressed as a nationality. And culturally, it's not like, it's very expensive. It's not something you can get affordably. And culturally, people just don't do it in the same way.
Like insurance doesn't cover it?
No.
Really?
Yeah. So
darn it.
It's not something that's done very much. I think it's happening more now because I think just like global people being aware of like American culture and therapy being so important here, people are doing it more. But yeah, it's definitely not as common.
They're kind of like, that's what we have pubs for.
Yeah, literally. Like, my therapist all the time will just be like, so you grew up how? I'm like, I know, I can't go into it. It's fine. It worked. It's fine. But anyway, well, this was so fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Listen, you've given me such a good reason to dive back into these.
Good.
I was asked for my favorites, and I was like, these were in my mind the ones that I was like, wow, I could live in any of these forever. And now I'm like, it's time for me to revisit them.
Dive back in.
That's the beauty of having kind of a little bit of a brittle memory, is like you get to experience things.
You get to experience it
many
again.
times.
Yeah, and like have that first feeling all over again.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I love these.
Thank you. That was amazing. Appreciate it.
Great.